Hi, everybody. This is Steve. And it does seem a little weird to be talking about home hardening and fire escaping when we have this atmospheric river going on outside. But happy spring. And spring means that summer is only 90 days away. And so it's never too early to start talking about the subject we're going to talk about tonight. And not that we needed it, but the last several years have been another wake-up call for us regarding the threat of wildfires in our area. And in fact, with all the rain we've been having this season, they're predicting pretty severe fire season this year because of all the grasses and all the growth we're going to have. The year of 2020 was by far the worst year for wildfires since we began tracking. In fact, 5 of the 10 largest fires in California history occurred in 2020. And over 10,000 structures were destroyed and 28 lives lost, including 3 firefighters. In the past 20 years, 17 of the most destructive wildfires in California history have occurred. And that does not include the Oakland Hills fire in '91 and the Jones fire in Shasta in 1999. 2021 had more fires than in 2020, but less acreage. In 2021, there were 2 of the top 20 most destructive fires. The Dixie Fire alone consumed 500,000 acres. So, and 2022, our most recent fire season, was actually a fairly average year due to cooperating weather and more fire preparedness programs at every level. According to a recent study by CAL FIRE, sudden oak death and bark beetles have accounted for over 150 million dead trees. As well as that, the changing climate, there's been 6 of the hottest days since records have been kept, have been recorded in the last 5 years. And July 2020 was the hottest month ever recorded in California. And I'm sure you all can remember the days in particularly 2020 when we had smoke in the area and the excessive heat. We've had large fires in the East Bay, 1923, 1970, and 1991 were extreme large fires here. Also, in our area, 60% of the homes that have been built since 1990 have been built in the Wild Urban Interface area, or WUI. And WUI, you might hear that term sometimes in literature, and you might hear it again later on today. That's a zone of transition between wildland and human development, and communities that are built in a WUI are at greater risk of catastrophic wildfire, and their presence there disrupts the ecology. The advance of building in these areas in recent decades has significant implications for wildfire management. It creates environments where fire can move readily between structures and vegetation fuels. And this is relevant to all the areas in the East Bay and Contra Costa, and not just communities that are heavily wooded, because wildfires can easily start in an area like the hills in Concord or Martinez, Antioch, and it could easily spread to other residential areas. But generally, the homes most at risk are those on the hillsides near wildland or open space. So this is the new normal, and we need to learn how to live with the threat of wildfire and take steps to try to reduce the risk. The most important measures you can take are home hardening, which are taking appropriate steps to greatly improve the chance of your home and structures withstanding ignition by wildfire, embers, and other factors. During this presentation, you will hear the term defensible space numerous times. Creating and maintaining defensible space area up to 100 feet from your home is a way to harden your property and your home. Firescaping will be the second part of the presentation. Hedwig will be talking about that. And that is landscape design that reduces the house and property vulnerability to fire. And Hedwig will, like I said, will be talking about that further. So hardening your property, and I think in this picture is a clear example of a property on the left that before it's been before defensible space is being created, and on the right after. And I'm going to get into a little bit more how you do that, but I think you can clearly see the difference. I do want to say that hardening is not fireproofing, but it addresses the most vulnerable components of your property with materials and techniques that increase the resistance to the sources of fire. So first is background. I will talk about the 3 types of risks your home may be exposed to during wildfire. Next, I will explain the concept of defensible space, which is the area between your home and an oncoming fire. And then I'll briefly talk about local fire codes, and I will end the discussion talking about notification warning systems and preparedness. So in order to prepare and protect your property from wildfire, we'll help to identify the 3 main ways that your property can catch on fire. They are by direct flame, radiant heat, and embers, which are also called firebrands. Understanding that these are the threats can assist in critically evaluating where you may need to focus your preparedness efforts in order to make your property as safe as possible. First, I'll talk about direct flame. Direct flames from wildfire are often not hot enough to ignite a home. Though depending on time and exposure, direct flame contact can ignite a home and your surrounding property. Though flames often will not ignite a house, plants under or around your home and other flammable materials close to the home can catch on fire. They can break windows, and they can allow fire to enter the home. Next is radiant heat. Radiant heat is generated from burning structures or vegetation, and it can be hot enough to ignite a house without direct flame. This is particularly challenging in densely populated areas and subdivisions where heat from one burning home can ignite the next home and create a chain reaction. That is what occurred in Coffey Park. That was the crown jewel of a large development in Santa Rosa fire that occurred in 2017. It was called the Tubbs Fire, and that's what happened there. Responsible for most home ignitions and the cause of 2 out of every 3 structure fires in a wildfire are embers. Embers are small pieces of burning material that can travel 1 to 2 miles ahead of a wildfire. They can create spot fires when they land on a receptive fuel bed, like a gutter filled with debris, dried vegetation on your property, wood decks, porches, wood trellises, flammable furniture near a structure. Embers can also get into vents. They can get in through broken windows. They can get under the siding of houses, or if you have cracks in your stucco or wood siding. Oftentimes, if there's a fire, maybe a couple of miles away, and a house, a random house, maybe 2 miles away catches on fire, it leaves people puzzled. How did that happen? But these embers are a major threat. And that's what that was the major threat of the Caldor fire that occurred in the Tahoe Basin in the last few years. Next, I'm going to talk a little about defensible space. So defensible space is a term you have all probably heard about in literature and discussions whenever you hear about fire prevention. And in California, we use a model, the 3 subzones of defensible space. That's an area that covers approximately 100 feet surrounding your home, and that's called the home ignition zone. The idea in defensible space is to interrupt the path of fire and slow it down toward the home until firefighters can arrive. The basic concept is you reduce the possibility that radiant heat will build up on your property and also reduce the potential that embers or flames will ignite vegetation adjacent to your home. You create this space with the selection of building materials, designs, and the selection and placement and maintenance of vegetation that will help your home resist wildfire and improve the chances of your home surviving and not spreading to an area beyond your property. And Hedwig will be discussing her part of today's program on the vegetation aspects of defensible space. So the three zones of defensible space, the way we refer to them are zone 0, that's the near area, and it's also an ember resistant area, we call it. And that's from your home out to about 5 feet. Zone 1 is the mid area, also called the lean, clean, and green zone. And that's an area of 5 to 30 feet from your home. And zone 2, which is the far area or the reduced fuel zone, is an area of about 30 feet out to 100 or more if you have more property than that. And I understand that not everybody has 100 feet of property out from your home. So you would adjust accordingly in creating and maintaining this defensible space. And if a neighbor's home is closer than 100 feet, it's especially important to harden your home in order to reduce the vulnerability of the radiant heat from their home, that the radiant heat from their home will ignite your home in the event of a wildfire. So ideally, it's great if you can coordinate with neighbors to reduce risk. Because if you can do everything possible on your property, if your neighbor doesn't, then your home will be at risk. So I'm going to go into each of the zones here a little bit further now. So in this zone, which is the 0 zone, 0 to 5 feet from the home, the idea is to try to remove as much of the combustible material as possible. This should be the no fuel zone. So what you want to do is eliminate the receptive fuel beds. This includes leaves and pine needles, mulch, wood chips, debris, dead vegetation. A lot of people like to store like firewood near their home, propane tanks, and other kind of flammables right around the home. I know that a lot of property owners, including me, use wood chips around their home to suppress weeds and to retain moisture as a mulch, but wood chips, bark mulch will ignite and become flying embers during a wildfire. So, like at my home, I still have the bark mulch, but I've cleared it away several feet from my house. And in fact, where we live in Moraga and Orinda, it's prohibited to have bark mulch 2 feet. You have to have a 2-foot zone with no bark mulch around the home. Homeowners should also consider the selection of building materials and designs that will help your home resist a wildfire. Most of the older homes had 1/4-inch vents on the home. Now it's recommended to have 1/8-inch vents or smaller or ember-resistant vents. And I have the slide showing up here how it shows ember-resistant vents. And these can be costly, but since embers getting into a vent is one of the leading homes, one of the leading causes of igniting a home, it may be worth investments. And in many areas of the county, these types of vents are now required on all new construction or when doing major renovation projects. Besides embers entering through vents, embers landing in gutters or on roofs filled with debris is also a common way that homes can ignite in wildfires. So regularly cleaning gutters, roofs, or installing leaf guards can protect against this. I added leaf guards to my house, and as a because I'm surrounded by trees, and especially pine trees. But as a master gardener, we cannot recommend specific products. But if you search for ember-resistant vents or gutter guards, you'll see many different choices. And doing this type of work in advance will help to slow down fires until firefighters will arrive. The next zone is zone 1. That's the zone from 5 to 30 feet out from the home. And they use the phrase the lean, clean, and green zone. And the idea is to eliminate connectivity between the islands of vegetation and your home. So the lean part is the area directly closer to the home, and the fire codes and everywhere that we live specifically addresses a lot of this. One of the concepts is ladder fuels. Ladder fuel refers to live or dead vegetation that allows a fire to climb up from the landscape or ground into the tree canopy, where it's more difficult for firefighters to fight a fire. This is called the laddering effect. This includes like tall grass, shrubs, and dead trees that are leaning like against another tree. The idea is you create a distance between these fuels and the trees so fire cannot easily jump from one source to the other, and possibly jump from there to the roof of your home. Ideally, all branches should be pruned to provide 6 feet from the ground to the limb of a tree, or 3 times the height of a shrub under a tree to the first branch. Now, as a master gardener, I just want to caution that if you're cutting tree limbs or pruning shrubs, ensure that you're doing this at the correct time of year and using the proper methods to prune. And you can, research that through master gardeners, how to prune and when to prune. For instance, oak trees. I do know oak trees. I have oak trees on my property, as many of us do. And oak trees, the best time to prune oak trees is during the coldest months of the year, generally speaking. The clean zone is like good sanitation. Think about this as outdoor housekeeping. It's an ongoing process, just like cleaning your home. And green. All plants will burn, but healthy, hydrated plants add to protection. So if you have, you should always try to keep them irrigated, and if it's best to use high water content plants, and Hedwig will be talking more about that. And the final zone is the reduced fuel zone, and this is the zone from 30 feet to 100 feet or more if you have that much property. And the idea here is to reduce energy and spread of fire by eliminating continuous dense vegetation vertically and horizontally. So that means, if possible, there should be separation of about 10 feet between trees on flat areas and more on slopes. You should cut your shrubs and unirrigated shrubs and grass, and keep your weeds down 3 inches or less. Also, it's important that you maintain the vegetation in riparian areas, because waterways in our county are protected and it's regulated by local, county, and state. So in any of these programs, you're not by law, you're not supposed to go into riparian or creek areas and cut. And and it's also, you want to look at, when the size of the tree, and cutting branches and pruning. You want to make sure that newly planted trees, you should usually wait 2 to 3 years before removing foliage on the trunk, unless it's leading to really poor structure. And the tree's structural trunk and root strength will be stronger if those younger trees retain their foliage. So you just need to, be aware when doing any of this work. So in concluding this section on defensible space, try to remember removal of, reduction of, and replacement of. In 2008, the state implemented new fire-resistant building standards for homes in high fire-prone areas, and that's much of the area of Contra Costa County. And in fact, in 2018, the Camp Fire, which is the fire that tore through Paradise, 18% of the homes built prior to 2008 were undamaged, while 50% of those built after were undamaged, after the new regulations were in place. So defensible space works, but only if it's created and maintained. And so it's important and great to do, but for defensible space, but don't forget about the actual home and make that as fire resistant as possible. Don't forget about wooden fences, pergolas, and gates that are attached or within 10 feet of a structure, because those can burn, and the radiant heat or the flames can catch on your house. So now, with most new homes in our county, wooden fences and gates are prohibited from touching the actual house if you're doing major renovations or building a new home. And there's lots of other types of products that are available now that can have the same effect as wood. So I'm going to talk a little about fire codes. Every 3 years, every jurisdiction, everywhere we live, makes changes to their fire codes. We're all on the same schedule. You can find your local fire code on the website of your local fire agency. I happen to have on the screen right now MOFD, where we are, Moraga in the fire district. And these changes, like I said, every 3 years, and they're presently being adopted throughout the county and Alameda County as well, if you're watching from there. A big major change this year is that for the first time ever, all of Contra Costa County are adopting pretty much the same uniform fire code. And it's been based on the model that we led here at Moraga Orinda. And so this is a big change. And it's going on now where if you do live in Moraga Orinda or anywhere, so it may not be the new fire code may not be effective yet. So where we are right now, because we're a fire district, the town of Moraga, the city of Orinda, and the Board of Supervisors all have to approve it. And that process is occurring. And I think by the end of this week, it will be done. But major changes that occurred in our fire code in the last fire code that are still going to be in effect were the no organic mulches within 2 feet of the house. And this is now going to affect almost most of the parts of the county. All Monterey pines and eucalyptus within 6 feet of any home had to be removed. And a big piece was that any home being sold or transferred had to have a up-to-date fire inspection and be and can be in approval of your local fire code. And the date everywhere in the county now, the date to be in compliance with your local code has been changed, and it's now uniform at May 31st. So we're the 21st of March here. So we're talking about 2 months. 2 months and 10 days before the fire code. So even though it's raining out there today, it's time. And most jurisdictions will send out notices prior to the date when this occurs. So CWS is the community warning system. This is a system that is only used for life-threatening incidents, and it's maintained in Contra Costa County by the Sheriff's Department, and it can contact you in numerous ways. Can text you, email you, landline, and it's our model here that we use in Contra Costa County is the model for the rest of the country. It was the first system like this, and it's used everywhere now. If I hope you take away other things from this program today, but I see that a majority of you didn't even know what CWS is, and maybe I should have just said community warning system. But if you're not signed up, it'll be in the handout as well. Please sign up for www.cococws.us. You can sign up all your family members. So it's really important. And this is only, like I said, this would be in the case of a major wildfire or when you have to evacuate. I want to go through a few other notification systems that we have available. Next one is Nixel. Some of you may have this one. And this is a site that is routinely used to transmit non-life-threatening messages to residents. And many, like where I live here in Moraga Rinda, both the town and the city use Nixel. And this might be the first notification you get that there may be a small fire in your community. Or sometimes they use it to say there's a gas leak or a tree down or the road is closed. Okay, so that's you can do that just by signing up through that through the text. Next one is PulsePoint. This is a free app that runs on your phone. The app can be set up to follow your local fire service provider and will alert you when they are dispatched to an incident. So this is a really cool thing. I love this one. If you're sitting at home and you ever hear those fire engines or a siren going by and you go, I wonder where that is. It sounds close. You just click this app and it'll say where the fire agency has been dispatched to and what it's for. So sometimes, you may see someone on your street or next street and you go, oh, there's a fire on the next street, or somebody on my street needed a medical service. And finally, I just want to mention Zonehaven. Zonehaven is a new site that everywhere in Contra Costa is presently using. It's a site that it is a campaign to help build awareness of evacuations. And if you go to this site, you can find out what your evacuation zone is. And in 2021, it was adapted as the county model. And so you can go on there and put in your address. You can find your exact evacuation zone. And if you get texts or anything, and like I know my evacuation zone is 025. And if I get a text and says people in 025 are evacuating, I know it's me. I know this is really quick. Let's go through these last few things. As a certified, I'm a CERT team member as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't end my talk with some quick info on being prepared. Some of the items, you've probably heard a lot of these, go bags, with your documents. Great to have a weather radio with an alert function on it. A UPS, uninterruptible power supply. If you do get one, 450 volts or amps is recommended. The other things, have a family plan, think about your neighbors, sign up for your local CERT programs if you have one, that's Citizens Emergency Response Teams, and also look into becoming a Firewise community if you're not already. In our area here, we have about 30 that right now. It's a program of the National Fire Protection Association, part of the USDA, Forest Service, Department of the Interior, and it coordinates programs with guidelines for how neighborhoods can work together in order to reduce fire risks. Key points, just takeaways: do your work, be aware of your local fire code and best practices. Please sign up, at least for the CWS. Be prepared, have a plan, assist your neighbors, and in CERT, the motto we use is hope for the best and plan for the worst. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, for this important information, because saving your life and that of your loved one takes priority over everything else. So thank you, Steve. So let's first define firescaping. Firescaping is landscape design that reduces the vulnerability of your home and property to wildfire. It is traditional landscape design implemented with the principles of defensible space, a choice of fire safer plans, and the use of non-flammable materials, so it can offer you the best defensible space against a wildfire while also beautifying your property as well. There are 4 key components to firescaping. Whether you start from scratch or whether you're renovating renovating an existing landscape, designing a fire-tolerant garden comes first. During the design phase, a lot of things need to be taken in consideration. During this presentation, you might come to realize that the maintenance of your property actually is the most important component of firescaping. Third comes the careful selection and placement of your plants. And last, but certainly not in the least, getting involved with your community to not only create a Firewise garden, but a Firewise neighborhood as well. Now let's take a look at each of these 4 components. Before starting on your design plan, take a close look at the lay of your land. Good decisions will depend upon topography, existing vegetation, your location and local weather, and whether your site can be irrigated. For example, if your home is located on a brushy site above a south or west facing slope, it will require much more extensive planning for defensible space than a house situated on a flat lot with little or no vegetation around it. The steeper the slope, the faster a fire will spread. And slopes with a lot of vegetation are particularly hazardous, especially when they cannot be irrigated. So the steeper the slope, it is the farther apart we need to place our plants. So with the principles of defensible space in mind, is it possible for us to create a beautiful and fire-tolerant garden? And the answer is yes, we can. You certainly do not need to hardscape your property like in this photograph with little or no vegetation at all. The outdoor spaces around your home consist of hardscapes and softscapes. The softscapes are your plants and living elements, and the hardscapes are the non-living elements of your landscape, which you use for driveways, walkways, fences and gates, and so forth. Designing your hardscape well does not only function as a fuel break, but it can really beautify your property as well. Like in this photograph of the Bueller home in Orinda, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, where boulders were used around a koi pond and a concrete walkway around the house without any vegetation growing against the siding of the house or overhanging the roof. I do not think Mr. Wright had firescaping in mind when designing this home, but this is an excellent example for using principles of defensible space in Zone 0 and Zone 1. Another great example is this more contemporary property. Large pavers were placed around the main home together with a well-irrigated lawn in the back, and concrete retaining walls and steps lead you uphill to a guest house built with non-flammable siding. The gravel playground in front of the guest house, as well as another concrete retaining wall behind the guest house, are all excellent choices. As you can see, this home is in a rather wooded area with well-maintained large trees that are thinned out and pruned up, and the ground vegetation is kept low and well irrigated. The house on this property, which you cannot really see on the picture, is a more traditional Mediterranean-styled home with a rather steep circular hidden driveway. It is hard to see, but this driveway really functions as a fuel break as it runs uphill behind a well-maintained specimen tree all the way past the front door of this property, of this house. In the front of this driveway, you can see a large rock garden created with extra wide stone steps, rocks, boulders, and low-growing plants, all very complementary to the style of this home. And here are a few more examples of hardscaping. You can use water, boulders, and rocks for ponds, swimming pools, dry riverbed, as well as succulent gardens. Concrete retaining walls can be designed in a way so they can double function as extra seating. In my neighborhood, I see a lot of fences similar to the second picture on the bottom row. Most of the time, it's a combination of wood and metal. An alternative to wood, however, is using cement board, which is a more fire-safe material. As Steve mentioned, fences, gates, and shade structures are best built in metal, especially when attached to the home. Coated steel is a rather expensive material, but it is gaining popularity because it is not only very beautiful, it is also a very strong retaining wall material with a narrow profile. So now we are getting to the hard part, keeping it all well maintained. It really is a year-round task. The beautiful garden on this photograph is impeccably maintained and cared for. And luckily this year we have been blessed with a lot of winter rains, but if it will help our extreme drought remains to be seen. With the drought, climate change, and wildfire in mind, can we still afford designing lush gardens like this here in California? When it comes to fire-smart landscaping, it is much more important to consider where a plant is situated and how it is maintained than the actual plant itself. The top left of this drawing shows you a lush garden similar to the photo I just showed you. This garden design does not follow the defensible space principles. In contrast to the bottom right drawing, which shows no planting near the home, a solitary tree pruned up and away from the house, and islands of plantings with adequate space in between. Let's revisit the photo of the Bueller home for the no ignition zone 0, which is the most restricted. This zone should only contain non-combustible materials, which means no foundation plants and no vegetation overhanging the roof. It is like creating a non-flammable apron around your home, which will give you the best protection against flying embers. In Zone 1, plant only low-growing, non-woody plants and ground covers. Succulents, vegetables, flowers, even a lawn are great choices here. It is very important to keep plantings well-spaced, well-irrigated, and well-maintained. Remember what Steve said, keep it lean, clean, and green, and remove all vegetation that could catch fire. Creating islands of root plantings with space in between will also allow easy access for maintenance. It is also a good idea to use rock, gravel, and non-flammable materials in between those islands, as well as around other structures on your property. When using mulch, however, make sure it is non-flammable. Our handout includes an interesting study on the flammability of the different mulches. Steve mentioned that the objective of Zone 2 is to decrease the energy and speed of fire by getting rid of continuous dense vegetation, both horizontally and vertically, Proper spacing and pruning of your trees and shrubs is very important and will depend on the lay of the land. It is very well possible that some trees and shrubs will need to be removed in order to follow the principles of defensible space. Zone 2 can also reach beyond your property when you live in close proximity of your neighbor, such as a townhouse or an HOA community, especially when surrounded by wood zones. In a nutshell, for regular maintenance, we need to prune and thin trees, shrubs, and low-growing plants, remove weeds and dead vegetation, as well as keep the roof, eaves, and gutters clean, and irrigate according to each plant's needs. The top image on this slide shows you a manzanita neatly pruned up with dead leaves and branches removed. Manzanita is mentioned on both hazardous and fire safer plant lists. When growing older, however, manzanita stays only green on the top and develops dry undergrowth which needs to be removed. And pruning a manzanita well can make it almost look like a garden sculpture due to its smooth, dark bark and interesting twisted branches. On the second image, you see a sloped side with very mature oak trees that have been thinned out and pruned up. There's only a thin layer of fallen leaves on the ground and nothing growing underneath the oaks. This homeowner also removed quite a few of her oak trees. She also worked together with her neighbor to keep fences clear and of vegetation and wind-blown debris. These two photographs show you the same tree, once before maintenance and once after. This is a good example of keeping your landscape clean, lean, and green. And wouldn't you agree that this tree looks so much more attractive with the trunk and lower branches showing? It is important to select the right plant for the right place. Fire escape plants do exist, however, with enough heat, all plants will burn. Ideally, we'd like to plant California natives. Not only are they better adapted to our local climate, most of them are also low in maintenance, drought resistant, water-wise, and fire tolerant. You have to choose wisely though, as they can be quite flammable as well. And proper plant selection requires a lot of research. Many lists of fire hazardous and Firewise plants are available. Unfortunately, none are science-based and are at times even contradicting each other. Our handout includes a list of fire safe plants from Diablo Fire Safe Council. We are also sharing useful links so that you can do some of your own research online. And doing your research of what to plant and what to avoid in your particular landscape, we encourage you to visit local botanical gardens, demonstration gardens, as well as Firewise gardens and landscapes. A lot of literature and it's available for gardens and landscape as well. And I'm sure that your local librarian can help you doing your research as well. By the time spring comes along, many of us get excited about the new growing season. When choosing your plants, though, you have to buy not impulsively or what looks good in the nursery. Bamboo, fountain grass, eucalyptus, chamise, juniper, and rosemary are all hazardous plants because they build up a lot of dead material. They have tiny leaves that easily ignite and they lose their moisture easily. They also have a high volume of vegetation versus the size of a plant. And many also contain flammable oils. When you compare this to fire safer plants, they have little volume versus the size of the plant and have a more open and airy form. They usually have thicker and larger leaves and a higher moisture content. They also produce little dead material. It is best to choose native trees and shrubs that are well adapted and well maintained, but it is also important to keep the longevity and size at maturity in mind. Avoid planting in rows or hedges because this can cause an uninterrupted path of fire. And try to choose trees that shed minimal amount of vegetation. Leaves of broadleaf trees give up their moisture more slowly and will often scorch before catching fire. Deciduous trees are considered even more fire safe since their thin, moist leaves simply shrivel when exposed to extreme heat. Also keep in mind that healthy plants are more fire resistant than plants struggling to survive. Apart from maintenance, we also need to pay attention to our soil and the required conditions for your selected plants, because distressed plants die, wilt, or will produce hazardous material that is dangerous for fires. Because of the limited time left for this presentation, I can only give you a few examples. I see juniper often used close to homes and driveways, as it is low maintenance, drought tolerant, and needs very little water. It is, however, often called the green gas can, as it produces a lot of dry and brittle undergrowth, especially when mature. It also has a high oil content. This is extremely dangerous if an ember gets lodged in juniper close to your house in case of a wildfire. Bamboo is mostly grown as a green screen or hedge. Bamboo should be removed from structures and entryways, as all bamboo are flammable, especially because of the wooden stem and dead material. Chamise is a flowering California native shrub, mostly found in chaparral areas. It is holding the soil of many of our California hillsides, and chamise sprouts back easily after fires. It is, however, also highly flammable. Other fire-prone natives are chaparral pea, artemisia because of the debris, coyote brush, and many more. If they are growing in the wild and not being irrigated or maintained. The Western redbud is one of my personal favorites, which can be grown as a tree or a shrub. Not only is Western redbud a California native and Firewise, it is also visually very attractive and a desired wildlife tree. Birds just love it. Very often, Western redbud, which doesn't bear fruit, is used as an alternative to prunus. There are several different varieties of monkey flower, which is a California native and produces attractive flowers from early spring into summer. It is also a good choice for a fire-resistant plant. Cacti and succulents are wonderful low-growing plants that have very low watering needs. The fact that they can store up to 80% of available water is pretty amazing. Many succulents just love to hug rocks and stone, which adds to the beauty of many hardscape gardens. Succulents are native to many arid areas all over the world, including California. And the reason why they are fire safer is that when exposed to fire, most succulents first burn or char before burning up. And this is because of their high moisture content. Every time I drive by the Gateway Emergency Exhibit Center, I'm reminded of the real threat of wildfires here in California. Getting involved about fire safety is certainly much more than pulling weeds. Most wildfires are caused by humans. We need to protect ourselves from ourselves, our neighbors, and the whole neighborhood we live in. The house on the left completely burned down early one morning in my neighborhood. My friend lives next door and had to evacuate in the wee hours, not knowing whether her home would survive or not. Like for so many people, these last few years, it was a devastating experience. The picture on the right shows you the same property completely leveled to the ground at the cost of the homeowner, who now has to deal with a lien against his property because this fire was caused by negligence. If you notice a hazardous situation like this, please report it. When it comes to wildfire, no single person alone can protect the community. First, we have to work with our immediate neighbors. Like Steve mentioned, if your immediate neighbor property isn't fire safe, chances are that your Firewise property will not survive during a wildfire either. Obtaining a Firewise community status requires a lot of volunteer effort in your community to reduce the risk of spreading wildfires, as now the Defensible space principles are extended to the whole community, not just your property. Some communities are even required to obtain this status because of the difficulty to get good homeowners insurance. Here are some examples of ongoing community efforts. One is at Rossmore, which is a large but rather dense HOA community surrounded by a lot of green space. When I visited a few years ago, the landscape crew was in process of removing all juniper and dying Monterey pine trees. The picture on the right shows you a well-designed new housing complex with a large, beautiful, multi-use firescape courtyard. We are getting to the end of our presentation, and I'd like to close with a request to all of you. Why don't we all work together and create a safer neighborhood? Mother Earth will be very pleased and most grateful. Thank you.